Welcome to the third and final day of the Renew Wisconsin Renewable Energy Summit. I'm Heather Allen, Executive Director of Renew Wisconsin, and I'm very excited to have you with us today. Presented by Arch Electric, Green Penny, and Invenergy, the theme of this year's event, Building the Clean Energy Mosaic, will highlight the diversity of technologies, people, and scale needed to shape our clean energy future. I'd like to take a moment and just recognize the history of the land here. In Madison, Wisconsin, I live on land that was once land belonging to the Ho-Chunk Nation, and I recognize the privilege generated from the land being stolen from that nation. I look forward to working with our Native nations to ensure the work we do reflects the generations of land and natural resources stewardship. Today, I'm very excited that we have an amazing lineup of speakers and a virtual event space offering one-on-one meetings, exhibitor booths, and daily interactive industry conversations at 2 p.m. There's a short video tutorial to show how to engage with exhibitors and other attendees available on our Summit webpage. Just click on the My Summit drop-down menu and then click on the event space tutorial. If at any time you have questions or technical issues during the event, please reach out to our event support at Nonprofit Learning Lab. Their phone number is prominently displayed on the main page of the Summit website. A reminder that all programming, with the exception of the industry sessions, will be available on demand. You can access programming that you missed or that you'd like to revisit by returning to the Event Hub and clicking View Session. We will send attendees an email when on-demand videos are posted. Also, on the Summit webpage, you will find red boxes that you can click on for the 2020 Year in Review, the Energy Awards, and the Renewable Energy Stories. These take you to video presentations prepared by Michael Vickerman and Sam Deniski, highlighting exciting renewable energy developments in 2020. I encourage you to check those out, as well as the many opportunities to learn and connect at the Event Hub. And I'd like to remind you to mark your calendars for the Renew Wisconsin Renewable Energy Bike Ride, which will take place on May 23rd, 2021 in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. It's sponsored by Xcel Energy, and we will tour a number of renewable energy installations on our bicycles up in the Eau Claire area. I'm very excited about that. This summit would not be possible without the generous support of our summit sponsors. I'd like to invite my colleague, Morgan Kamholtz, to join me in recognizing our summit sponsors. We'd like to say thank you to our presenting sponsors, Arch Electric, Invenergy, and Green Penny.
Thank you to our partner sponsors, Alliant Energy, CED Green Tech, Eagle Point Solar, Madison College, Northwind Solar, SC Johnson, Stantec, Wisconsin Office of Energy Innovation, and Xcel Energy.
Thank you to our leader sponsors, Applied Ecological Services, Bolt, Carlson Electric, Endries Solar and Electric, NG North American, Focus on Energy Aptum, Foley and Lardner, Full Spectrum Solar, Madison Gas and Electric Foundation, National Grid, Sunvest Solar, Werner Electric, Westwood, Wyderk, and WPPI Energy.
Thank you to our champion sponsors, Dane County Office of Energy and Climate Change, Eland Electric, Mars EOR, Good Steward Consulting, Kapur and Associates, Keys and Fox, Legacy Solar Cooperative, One Energy, Organic Valley, Ranger Power, Steigerwalt Land Services, Strategic Economic Research, Sunbadger Solar, TRC, Wisconsin Academy of Sciences, Arts and Letters, and the Wisconsin Building Trades Council.
Thank you to our advocate sponsors, Apex Clean Energy, Braun Intertech, Broadwind, Chad's Design Build, City of Madison, City of Milwaukee, Milwaukee Shines, Clean Fuel Partners, the Couillard Solar Foundation, Dairyland Power Cooperative, Energy Law Wisconsin, the Environmental Law and Policy Center, GDS Associates, Gunderson Health System, HGA Architects and Engineers, McKinstry, Midwest Solar Power, Northeast Wisconsin Technical College, Olson Solar Energy, PACE, PRC Wind, Sustain Dane, Stonehouse Development, UW Platteville, Wisconsin Health Professionals for Climate Action, and the Wisconsin Sustainable Business Council. Thank you all so much. I'd now like to invite Stanley Minnick, the Experience and Branch Manager from Arch Electric, today's presenting sponsor, for a brief address. With offices in Plymouth, Milwaukee, and Madison, Arch Electric is a leader in the solar industry, paving the way for renewables in Wisconsin. Arch Electric has a diverse staff of trusted, licensed NABCEP certified solar experts with over 100 years of combined experience. Thank you, Stanley.
Thanks, Heather, and to the rest of the staff at Renew and all the sponsors and supporters of this great organization and this great event. I also want to thank each of you. I'll be really brief because I know everybody wants to hear from Abby. And, I want to start by talking about everybody's favorite subject, which is permitting or puppies. We could go with puppies. So it's a little goofy. Anyone that's seen me speak or knows me knows that I can't help but get a little bit of humor into every presentation. But the bigger point here is behind each of these dogs is a family. And there's a person that wakes up early or stays up late, whether it's digging a trench or staring at spreadsheets. They're doing that to, provide for their families or their dogs and to make a difference. They've committed to having a mission and not just like a job or a career. So supporting organizations like these is obviously a big part in growing this industry. Behind each of these dogs and their people are business owners like Ed and Mindy Zinthofer, who in 2003, when solar was definitely not a sure bet at all, they took the leap and they started a business that at the time, was pretty, I guess, relatively small compared to where it is today, and has grown to 91 employees as of yesterday. You can see that between 2003 and 2017, 1.7 megawatts. I don't think we even were talking about megawatts in the early 2000s or the mid 2000s in Wisconsin very often. So those are mostly small projects, and obviously Arch's scale and scope has expanded well beyond its original beginnings. What's really interesting and unique about Arch is just that we do installations from 10 and 20 panels all the way up to 10,000 modules. So every policy decision, whether it's state, federal, local, HOA, whatever the case may be, we're going to be impacted by it. And that's why it's a no-brainer for a company like Arch Electric to sponsor Renew, the Summit, and all the other great organizations out there like SEIA and the Midwest Renewable Energy Association as well. So I want to thank everybody for supporting this industry by supporting these great organizations and for being part of creating the clean energy future that we all deserve. Thank you. And now I'll just figure out how to stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Stanley.
Yeah.
When this is all over, I really want to meet some of those dogs. That was great.
Thanks.
It is now my distinct pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Abigail Ross Hopper. She is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Solar Energy Industries Association, the national trade organization for America's solar energy industries. She oversees all of SEIA's activities, including government affairs, research, communications, and industry leadership, and is focused on creating a marketplace where solar will constitute a significant percentage of America's energy generation. Before joining SEIA, Abby was the director of the Department of Interior's Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, where she led the agency that oversaw the leasing and development of all offshore energy from oil and natural gas to offshore wind. She served formerly as the director of the Maryland Energy Administration, serving as acting beginning in 2012, and then as director starting in June 2013. She also served concurrently as energy advisor to Maryland Governor Martin O'Malley since 2010. In those roles, she has had a significant engagement with the state's electric distribution utilities on matters ranging from resiliency and reliability of the grid to multiple mergers of the state's utilities. Abby previously spent over 2 years as Deputy General Counsel with the Maryland Public Service Commission. Before embarking on a career in public service, Abby spent 9 years in private practice. Abby graduated cum laude from the University of Maryland School of Law and earned a Bachelor's of Arts degree from Dartmouth College. She's a proud mom of 3 children and loves to read, ride her Peloton, do hot yoga, and lay on the beach in her not so free time. She does it all. Thank you for being with us today.
Oh my gosh, Heather, thank you so much for having me. I'm really glad to be here. I wish that I was in Wisconsin. And I wish that we were on a stage together, but since we can't do that today, I'm excited about this opportunity. Stanley, that was a great introduction. I loved the dogs. I have so far not given in to my children's desire to have a pandemic puppy because I believe there will be a day when I get back on airplanes and I'm on the road visiting all of you all the time. And I don't think that'd be fair to my puppy, but it does represent, I mean, we do this work because we believe in the people that are doing it, the families that will benefit from it, and the planet that will heal from it. I just want to add my voice to the thank yous. I put on a lot of events as well, and I know how critically important sponsorship is. None of this could happen without sponsors. So to Invenergy, to Green Penny, to Arch Electric and Stanley, thank you so much. For all the other ones, I'm not going to read them all again, but thank you. It really does matter. But you guys all know that nothing happens without the actual team that puts it together. So to Heather and to Morgan, thank you. It's a pleasure prepping for this with you, and to Jody, thank you as well. I know that comms work is so critically important, and you're doing a great job. So I just joked with these guys, like it took me 6 months of pandemic to figure out how to share my screen, but I finally figured it out, I think. And so I just want to walk through kind of an overview of both what has happened, 2020, right? It seems like forever ago, and it seems like it's never ending. But there's a lot to talk about what happened in the solar and storage industry in 2020. But then I want to turn our focus to 2021 and beyond. We talk a lot about the solar plus decade here at SEIA. We have a really clear vision. We want to be at least 20% of the nation's electricity generation by 2030. We think we can do that, but we've got to make some really important policy changes to allow us to reach that goal. So the plan is for me to talk for 20-ish minutes, maybe not as many now because I've already been talking, and then Heather and I will chat, and I'd love to answer whatever questions you might have for me. So let's get started. Looking back on 2020, I don't even remember January and February. I think they were too normal, so they don't seem, I don't even consider them 2020 anymore. But if I had been here in Wisconsin last January of 2020, I would have told you that we were going to have a record year. We were going to break literally every single record in solar, despite a Republican administration, despite a president who doesn't love renewables, certainly. We were still going strong. And that would have been my message. Obviously, all that changed early in March when the way that I described it is the world just changed and everything was different. One of the most important things we did early on in the crisis was to secure essential worker status for solar installers and solar O&M. That meant that as state by state, the governors were making decisions about who could go to work and who had to stay at home. Solar installations can continue to be built, and that's huge, right? That means that you could all keep going to work every day. That did not happen by accident. That happened because we lobbied the Department of Homeland Security to make sure that we were included in that. Our companies did an amazing job of pivoting really quickly to implementing best practices from the CDC, to changing sales tactics. I'll talk a lot about permitting, Stanley, because we've had to change a lot about permitting. But that doesn't mean that we were unaffected. You can see this chart on the screen in front of you. That top line was the baseline. That's what we thought would happen in 2020 prior to COVID. And then the blue line is what did happen. So, clearly we were impacted. Clearly we lost installations, lost investment, lost workers, and we had the best year we've ever had. We grew 43% year over year. All of our, sort of every metric was up. Doesn't mean it was without challenges. And certainly there are still pretty significant challenges for the distributed community and the distributed market. And we'll talk a little bit about what that is. But you can see we are continuing to grow. So I lead the National Trade Association. We have a huge state operation, and so we're in a lot of states and work with great partners like Renew Wisconsin. But we also have a federal presence, and so I spent a lot of the latter half of 2020 gaming out what happens in different scenarios that we could be ready. I'm obviously not going to walk through all of them because we know what the answer is now. But I will say that as we think about the priorities for our industry, we think about tax policy, carbon policy, trade policy, PERPA, RTO work, development on lands, public lands, and domestic manufacturing. That's an important one for us. And so you can see, I think it's all the way over on the right, blue, 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 trifecta has the most green lights. There's still some that are yellow, right? There's still some that we need to pay very close attention to, and we are, but it is probably the best outcome we could have for solar. But even before this new administration, this new Congress takes place, we spent all of last year, 2020, lobbying for you. One of the things I asked my organization to do early on in the COVID crisis was to stop doing what we were doing and call every single one of our companies. So I had research people on the phone and comms people on the phone and our membership team on the phone, calling every company and saying, what is happening? What do you need? How's your business going? What can we do to help you? And the stories were heartbreaking, and there were stories of bankruptcies and layoffs. But we were really clear. It became really clear what our industry needed. We needed more time to build. We needed direct pay for the tax credit. We needed permitting reform, and then we needed the whole suite of business benefits that the Congress did pass. Things like the payroll protection plan, things like extended unemployment insurance, things like the emergency loans. So our companies took advantage of a lot of those things. But as I hope you all know, at the end of last year, the very end of last year, we were incredibly successful in getting a 2-year extension to the ITC. So I love this bouncing ball, but you can see 26% in 2021, 26% in 22, and then it steps down as originally designed. We talk a lot about extending the ITC. I did not ever once talk about, no, I'm sorry. We talked a lot about delaying the phase down, not extending it. It may sound like not a meaningful distinction, but when you're lobbying in Congress, it is a meaningful distinction. This is a down payment on what we would like to see happen. So I will get to what we think can happen in this next Congress. But the Energy Act of 2020 that passed at the end of last year, the ITC certainly took a lot of the headlines, as it appropriately should, but there's also other pretty amazing stuff in there that I just want to make sure people are aware of. A $1.5 billion to the Department of Energy for the Solar Energy Research and Development Program. I'm meeting with the head of that tomorrow to talk about what our priorities are for that $1.5 billion. So that is a relationship that is strong and active, both with Republicans and Democrats. And so we have a huge ability to impact how those dollars are spent. Streamlining the permitting process through a renewable energy coordinating office, giving the Secretary of Interior the ability to reduce rental rates. That was an issue that came up at the end of the Obama administration. And then last but not least, the establishing goals for renewable energy production. We have a really great relationship with the designated new Secretary of Energy, Deb Haaland, Congresswoman Deb Haaland. She is a huge advocate for renewable energy. And Heather, to your point earlier about native lands, obviously she's a native citizen herself, and she and I have had many conversations about the ability of solar and energy sufficiency to help native lands. And so I'm excited to work with her on those things. So that's how we ended 2020, which was pretty great. So what do we want going forward? We have had many conversations with the new administration, the soon-to-be new administration, lots of discussions with the transition team. As you may know, they are in sort of specific categories to Department of Energy, Interior, Commerce, CEQ, and we've met with them all to talk both personnel and policy, what we think we need. And our asks are really around 3 areas. One is around climate and carbon. Not surprisingly, we need some specific things to make sure that we can reach those aggressive carbon goals that President-elect Biden has set forth. Workforce and infrastructure, right? Like we can't get this all happening if we don't have the people on the ground trained, and if we don't have the infrastructure like transmission, like interconnection to allow this to happen. And then competition, that is really an important ethos of SEIA. We really believe that consumers will benefit if there is competition for product, that you will innovate, you as business owners will innovate, you will compete, you will be creative, and you will have access to markets that you might not otherwise have access to. So that's a big part of our effort. We did put out that 100-day agenda. 3 of the things I think are ready. The Biden administration has already done. So 3 more to go in those first days. But as I said, we are not limited to federal advocacy. We do a lot of work in the states. I will not read these all to you, but it just gives you a glimpse of the kind of work we're doing. I want to highlight sort of that bottom right quarter, the bottom right square rectangle, I think it is. Mitigating risk. We think a lot about if we are going to grow rapidly and if we are going to grow and achieve the kind of goals that we'd like to, what problems do we need to anticipate and solve now? So kind of like Stanley said, doesn't matter if it's local, state, regional, federal, policy impacts all of our businesses. Not everyone likes to hear that, but it's the truth. And so how can we solve some of those before they become a problem for you in your business? So these are the things that we're working on. I'll talk a bit more about that. We think about how we do our work. One is that mitigating business risk, but the other is increasing market opportunities. And basically all of our work is centered around these 2 things. And so some of the things that I think are important and hopefully relevant to those of you doing business in Wisconsin, under the header of increasing market opportunities is to really improve residential permitting. We have been working with a bunch of companies on an effort called Solar App, which we're working with the National Renewable Energy Lab, developing an online platform where solar developers, solar installers can put sort of the metrics of a solar project in, and it will automatically be permitted. It is something that local jurisdictions will adopt, and it will make this process so much more efficient, so much more predictable, so much more timely. So much of the cost of residential and some commercial development is soft costs. And so we're really looking at tackling that. That's one of the things I have been talking to the Department of Energy about and will continue to talk to them about. If you're interested in that, we'd love to have your expertise as we work on that. Similarly, with interconnection, we know if we're going to grow rapidly, we really need to figure out the right interconnection rules. We think that the California Rule 21 remains the gold standard for how to do that. We have seen some updates in other states, but these principles we've worked on are key: transparency, certainty, cost, and enforceability, right? Like you can have all the best rules in the world, but if your Public Service Commission doesn't enforce them, and FERC doesn't back them up, it doesn't really matter. So happy to talk more about those, but that's an important piece of what we think we can work on. Similarly, PURPA really does, we think it's a critical tool to provide market access to generators like you. We have been working really hard at the federal level with FERC. I'm suing them right now because of this this rule that they put out recently that we think does not incent competition. But we also work with our partners in the states to make sure that the state commissions and the RTOs are holding monopolies accountable as well. And as we think about mitigating business risk, one of the key focuses for us at SEIA is really around diversity and environmental justice. We absolutely need to ensure that our workforce and our customer base reflects the diversity of our great nation. We need about 400,000 new workers to reach our 20% goal. We cannot just hope that they come and hope that they represent the diversity. We need to be very intentional about seeking out diverse communities and ensuring that they have the same access, not just to jobs, but to careers, and not just to careers, but to entrepreneurship. And so we are doing a lot of work at SEIA to make sure that our industry achieves that goal. There are also, it's not just the workers, but the communities, making sure that communities that are on the front lines of environmental racism have a voice in what their energy future looks like, where energy projects are sited. And so we are actively engaged in that work. Thinking again about mitigating risk, land use is so critical. I can imagine in Wisconsin that I know when I worked for the governor of Maryland, we already had some conflicts around ag land and renewable energy development land. And so thinking about how we do our land use, how we are responsible stewards, community partners is important. So we work on things like best practices to make sure that all of our developers are being good stewards. And then third-party ownership, again, anticipating, sort of understanding what's happening. That's where our research team comes in. So you can see how things are changing, that the third-party ownership amongst residential customers nationwide is going down, increasing for the commercial sector. But we feel really strongly that states should provide consumers that flexibility. And I know that that is, as yet, I think, an unsettled question in your great state of Wisconsin. And so that's just an overview of some of the things we are working on at SEIA. I am more than happy to answer whatever questions you might have, Heather, but I will turn it back over to you to lead us on in the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Abby. There's so much great stuff to dive into here. I have a question from the chat that I will ask you, and I will encourage everyone who's participating to, a question in the Q&A, to put your questions in the Q&A so I can ask them. My first question to you is, do you anticipate or expect that the Congress and incoming President Biden will look at passing significant energy policy legislation, in particular carbon fee and dividend?
Yeah, it is a really live question here in Washington. I am actually live in Washington, so I could go on about what it's like to live in an occupied city at the moment, but I won't. One of the things that we saw as a result of the 2020 election is that literally it couldn't get more divided, right? 50-50 in the Senate, and I think a seven person swing in the House. And so if we think about people like Joe Manchin, who not only is the Democrat from West Virginia, but also the chair of the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee, he is, he's not a Green New Dealer. He's not he doesn't want $2,000 stimulus checks. He doesn't think impeachment is the right way to go. So even though D's have with the new vice president having the deciding vote, they certainly don't have 100% unanimity around policy. And I say that because our sense is that most legislation that will get passed will drive to the center. And so I think that it is more likely that there will be perhaps an infrastructure package introduced early on that has things like maybe a tech neutral tax policy that would certainly benefit solar and storage and wind and other renewables. May have investments in transmission, may have investments in grid infrastructure, but may not be a carbon tax. I think that I'm not quite sure that this particular Congress is ready for that. I do think that there will be a much more fulsome conversation about it, though, right? Like, it's not going to be the third rail of politics like it has been for a little bit down here, but I don't know that they'll be ready. But I do think there will be big climate and energy legislation happening. It just might not have that word at the top of it.
Thank you. Yeah, that's very interesting. Well, speaking of those federal issues, let's dive in a little bit more to that stimulus bill and everything that was related to renewable energy in there. In particular, I noticed that there were a great deal of investments in research and research and development. Do you have any thoughts on those? What will happen? What will happen to the solar industry as a result of the new investment in research and development?
Yeah, it's really exciting. I had the privilege before the pandemic to testify on that bill, that piece of the bill, in front of Congress about why it was so critically important to keep investing. And the message that we carry to the Hill on R&D is that we need to do kind of all of the above. We need to invest in new technology, right? New whatever. I'm a lawyer. I don't know what all the technology is, but all of the stuff that like how to make solar panels more efficient, and what perovskites, like what different things should we do, and how do we make bifacials more efficient, and those sorts of things. But we also say, we don't need to like search for the silver bullet. Like we know that solar works, and we know that a big part of it is just deployment, getting deployment happening more quickly. And so we also talk a lot about things like grid integration, right? How do we get all of these different pieces of the grid to work together? You, DOE, should be researching that. And the soft cost is a really big deal. Storage, we advocate for storage as well, and the kind of R&D investments in storage to get costs down and sort of integration up, I think will be important. I just had the privilege of spending a little bit of conversation time with the incoming Secretary of Energy, talking about how important deployment is, right? Usually you think of, well, I think of DOE as the research arm and then Interior as a deployment arm. But Jennifer Granholm is very focused on deployment, which I think is great. So I think it'll be a big development for solar to have those kinds of resources. The domestic manufacturing, I don't want to skip over that. That's a big part of our strategy. I think there's opportunity for DOE to invest in that and other departments in the U.S. government, and so we're advocating for that as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting package. So I think there's going to be a lot of great things coming out of it. We've got wonderful questions coming in the chat. I've got one here on tariffs. Could you tell us a little bit about the current impacts from the current tariffs? What's the state of play on importing solar panels and other equipment?
Yeah. So when I took this job 4 years ago, I didn't really know anything about trade policy, and now I know a lot. So I'm just going to talk about the 201s first. So the 201s that put a tariff on all solar cells and modules coming in from basically any country, not just China. Everyone, like, people talk about it in terms of China, but very few of our imports come from China. The majority come from other areas of the world. And so those went in place, as you all know, in 2018. We have been, so that happened in February of 2018. I believe in June of 2018, we filed a request for an exclusion, a bifacial exclusion. And then it was actually on my birthday, that's what I remember. In June of 2019, we got the exclusion granted by the federal government, which was a really big deal because that was an important technological advancement, clearly not being manufactured here in the US, that was meaningful. And so that was in place for a couple months. And then literally, I again remember where I was on a golf course when I got the word that it had been revoked. And so we have been litigating that ever since and successfully litigating it. So that bifacial exclusion has been in place for well over a year. In October, the current president issued a proclamation that took away the bifacial and also changed the step down rate. So I'm sure you all know it went from 30, 25, 20, 15. So to go to on February 7th of this year, so in 3 weeks, to 15%. He changed it to 18%. So he slowed the step down. We are actively litigating that. So we waited until he signed the piece of energy legislation, and then we sued him. And then we are lobbying the new administration really hard because there's absolutely zero reason to change the step down. So those tariffs are in place, but know that we are literally working around the clock to provide some business certainty for you, right? We all plan for 15%. We've been talking to the Bidens a lot about an extension. Like, we don't think there's there's need for an extension of the 201 tariffs. There will likely be a proceeding because the domestic producers have a right to ask for that, but we will be opposing that. But that is why we have a very robust suite of policy initiatives to incent domestic manufacturing, right? Like, tariffs aren't the way to do it. There are other ways to do it. There's still 232 tariffs on steel. There are 301 tariffs against products coming out of China that are important for our supply chain. We're part of a much larger coalitions around those, right? Those are sort of industry-wide issues. I think that the Bidens will, their trade policy will be different, but I think will be very intentional in the beginning days. I think it's unlikely they're going to come in and make big changes to 232 or 301 tariffs.
Thank you. Well, speaking of panels, we get this question a lot, and I got it in the chat. Can you tell us a little bit about the current status of PV recycling and what you see in the future?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we're very active around PV recycling. It very much fits in the anticipating risk and mitigating risk. We see it, one of the benefits of being a national association is we see where things are popping up. And this is something that's popping up everywhere. Department of Public Waste or, the Department of Environment of fill in a state or a county is concerned about it. So we have a PV recycling working group at SEIA that is working on sort of those best practices so that we can come with a solution to this. One of the things we see on the political side is that there is often used an argument that either, panels are toxic at the end of their life, or that they're going to ruin the water supply. Just things that you and I know are not true, but it's always harder to argue the negative, like, no, they're fine. So we have pushed research to sort of have independent verifiers, right, that this is not true. So people like the National Renewable Energy Labs, but also to come up with a proposal. So in the state of Washington last year, there was a piece of legislation that was going to require a certain way of handling them. I think we fought it and we were able to get it put into a study bill. all good things go to study bills. But it is, I would encourage people, if you're interested, we have a very active group working on that at SEIA.
How could folks who are participating in our conference get connected to some of the resources that SEIA offers? So Renew is the SEIA chapter for Wisconsin, but how can people participate more in all of the work and opportunities that you put together?
Yeah, I will follow up with you, Heather, and maybe as like a post, when you send out your post conference thank you, sure. We can include some links to those things so people can find it very, very, very easily.
That sounds good. That sounds good. Great. Got a question here. You recently, or SEIA recently, communicated about forced labor practices in the solar supply chain. Can you talk a little bit more about your work there and what we can do to support ethical practices in the industry as a whole?
Yeah, that is a really important issue. We became aware of, there have been concerns about, forced labor issues in the Uyghur region of China for a long time, but only in the late fall did I and my team hear the first concerns about solar supply chain there. So we convened our board, I think within a week, and said, guys, like, we have to get all over this. We need to move your supply chains out of this region of China. We need to be super clear that this is unacceptable. And so we have over 150 of our companies now have signed the pledge that they will not have any sort of forced labor in their supply chains. But more importantly, what we're doing is creating a traceability protocol. So that because it's not the cells, it's not like the modules that are really the issue. There are polysilicon factories in that region. And so ensuring that the polysilicon that goes into the solar panels is not from that region is the really important piece here. And so we are developing with some kind of supply chain experts traceability protocol. So we can show US Customs that this is not the polysilicon coming out of China, if it's coming out of China, is not from this region, and there's no forced labor involved. So that's one piece of the solution. We've been super clear in our communications that everyone just needs to move. Don't wait for any protocol. Just make sure that you are not producing anything in that region of the country. There is a much larger discussion about polysilicon, and there are US assets here, and so we work with the US polysilicon producers to try and solve for how to create more domestic demand for their polysilicon as well. We have been up on the Hill, on Capitol Hill, virtually, just making sure that legislators know what we're doing because it's so important. There was a New York Times article, I think last Friday afternoon. Yeah. about it. And so it's very much on our radar screen. But I will include that link to that pledge as well. So if folks want to sign on to that, it's a really important thing.
Thank you. Thank you. So we just have about 5 minutes left to get all of your insights. But one thing you mentioned in your presentation was interconnection standards, and Wisconsin is underway. The Public Service Commission is underway in reevaluating and updating the interconnection standards. Can you tell us a little bit more about those values that are important in any framework that is established for interconnection standards? And you know, I was really interested in the transparency element there and how that fits in.
Yeah, absolutely. I am glad that your PC is looking at that. It's so important. The principles: transparency, certainty, cost, and enforceability. The transparency really is around who gets priority, right? Is there a fair line, right? Do you get in line and then you get your turn, or do you get in line and then an affiliate of the monopoly gets to go ahead of you? I know I think when I was in Maryland, there was a move to make everything super public, right? Like literally transparent. There was conversation about whether people had to have this level of down payment or this level of down payment or a certain amount of time. And so it's really around fairness, right? Like making sure that the rules are fair and consistently applied, the enforceable and clear, right? That it's, you know, most developers I talk to talk about the black box. Like they put in their interconnection application and it goes into the black box and they don't know what happened. They don't know what the process is. They don't know what the timing is. And it like spits out a bill, right? Like some incredibly large bill usually. And so we just want to shine a light on it, right? Just have it all out in the open and say, here's the process, here's how you get in line, and here's how the line is enforced, right? Like we've all had to stand in a lot more lines recently, so we know how important it is to have comfort in the line. But that enforceability piece, that's the last bullet, is really important. We see that in the purpose space, right? So, you know, if no one's going to hold commissions accountable, they're not going to, and they're not inclined to enforce the PURPA regulations, or they have different PURPA rates for incumbent utilities versus independent power producers, or they only self-deal, then it's not going to make a difference. So we're happy to work with you in Wisconsin to bring our expertise to be an asset in whatever way we can be helpful.
Thank you. That's very interesting. I think it's going to be, I think a lot of our members and solar installers across Wisconsin are very interested in this process that as it moves forward. So I've got a big picture question for you, really about utilities interaction with distributed solar. How can utilities be compensated, incentivized, or rewarded for better enabling customers to install solar on their homes or businesses? What are the sweet policy spot to make it a win-win for everyone?
Yeah, no, it's a really important question, and if I had the perfect answer, I probably would go be running a utility. The way that I have seen it work best in places across the country is where utilities sort of from a corporate mindset don't see it as a threat to their business model, but see it as an opportunity, right? And especially where they're very focused on what their customers want. And so like just that as kind of the predicate, right? Like wanting to give your customers what they want. And I think that when I think about the corporates and the amount of power that corporate customers have with utilities, as opposed to just me as an individual homeowner, they have a ton of power to either to withdraw from the utilities like the casinos in Vegas did, or to demand certain rate structures so that they'll go to a state and put all of their data centers there. And so I think when you align the business interests, I don't have a great answer, but I do think it's about aligning business interests and customer interests and not seeing them as at odds with each other. But we're super active in lots of commission proceedings across the nation because there are many utilities that do not feel like it's an opportunity but a risk.
Luckily, more and more in Wisconsin, we're seeing progress in these areas, and we have a open docket at the Public Service Commission on parallel generation and exploring all the best practices there. So there's lots of progress happening, and we're excited about the future. Well, I'm so grateful to you. It is always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for being here today. We're so grateful as well for the work you do for the renewable energy industry, and
Thank you.
Proud to be a SEIA chapter here in Wisconsin.
Well, you're a great partner, and we're super happy to work with you. And if we can travel by May, I want to come to the bike ride.
Oh, that would be fun. That
would be so fun.
Yeah, those are always really fun. Well, thank you again, Abigail Ross Hopper, for being here today. Thank you to Arch Electric for sponsoring this session. Many of our sponsors are represented in the virtual exhibitor space, so please visit the event website, click on exhibitors to learn more about them and to connect with our 2021 sponsors. It's not quite the same as being in person at a conference, but it's still a great opportunity to have those one-on-one conversations. So in just a moment, we'll take a 10-minute break where we would encourage you to step away from your computer, grab a cup of coffee, check out your emails, and then come right back at 10 o'clock sharp, because we will have the all-in panel. It's going to be a great conversation moderated by our policy director, Michael Vickerman, with Samantha Williams from the Natural Resources Defense Council, Nick Smith from Alliant Energy, and Ken Walls from the Madison Area Technical College. And then also, it's the last day of the conference, and I just want to give a sincere thank you to our Renew Wisconsin team, who has just gone above and beyond to put together a fantastic event for you all. Jody Jean Amble, our Communications and Events Director, headed this project, and I hope that she knows how greatly we appreciate her. And our full team includes Kristen Canitz, Office Manager, Michael Vickerman, Policy Director, Sam Denysky, Renewable Energy Program Director, Jim Bullion, our Government Affairs Director, Lauren Rieg, our Energy Analysis and Policy Intern, and Morgan Kamholz, our Communications Intern, have really put in tremendous amount of work for this event. So thank you all for being here, and thank you to everyone who's participating from your home or your personal computer. These have been great questions, great chat, and we look forward to sharing more information from SEIA with you in our follow-up emails. So thanks for being here today, and we'll see you at 10 a.m.